This is Live Forever Young Radio Live. I am Raleigh. This is Bob. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hi, Raleigh.
How's it going, Bob? Everything good today, my friend?
Tudo bem.
Tudo bem.
They say in Brazil.
Oh, really? Is that how they say?
Tudo bem. Everything's good.
Everything's good. Tudo bem. Write that down. I don't know how to spell it.
B-I-E-N, probably.
It's Tuda.
T-U-D-O. T-U-D-O. Tudo bem.
Tudo bem.
It's a very common phrase in Brazil. They greet each other that way.
Nice.
So they say, "Hey, Raleigh, tudo bem?"
Tudo bem.
You say tudo bem, and then you ask me, tudo bem?
Hey, Bob, tudo bem.
Tudo bem.
There we go, man. Hey, everybody, tudo bem.
Tudo bem, everybody.
Tudo bem, everybody. All right. So
it's like they say in is it Fiji? They say Sangamalanga.
Sangamalanga. I like that one better.
Yeah.
Sangamalanga.
Sangamalanga. It means no worries.
So did you just learn those things that way? If you ever find yourself in a place like Brazil or an Asian country, you know what to say.
No, I heard from Anthony Robbins because
Okay.
he owns a resort in Fiji.
Oh,
So he was talking in one of his teachings one day about how friendly the people are in Fiji. And they always say when they pass you by in the street, Sangamalanga, no worries.
Sangamalanga, like
No
Hakuna
worries.
Matata.
Yeah.
Cool.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Well, good. No worries. And we have no worries today because it's Thursday. We're hanging out 11 a.m. like we always do on Tuesday and Thursday. We're having a live.
Well, there is one thing we're worried about.
What's that?
We're worried about all these young people that are having strokes.
That
and
was
we're going
great.
to talk about that today.
What a great transition, Bob. You read my mind. So we found some really great information. Like we've told you, we've actually done a lot of shows pre-recorded on Live Forever Young Radio. So if you guys want to check those out, go to boomerboost.com. Check out our YouTube page that you're probably on right now. They're all there in our podcast. We just created a new podcast section on our YouTube page. So make sure that you check that out. It's a lot easier to find. So bottom line is we found some good information. We saw some stuff that says, just like Bob said, we're worried. Incidents of strokes in young adults have been on the rise. Very, very odd. Usually the incidents of strokes, obviously, are in much older individuals, but we found some information here that says a little bit different, right? So just some quick stuff about stroke, right? A little bit of, I like to start with the statistics.
Yeah.
Okay, so statistics. Stroke is the 5th leading cause of death in the United States and the leading cause of disability around the world. Okay, some good news about it is there's been some efforts in recent years to control blood pressure, diabetes, and atrial fibrillation, right? A lot of these preventative measures and things that we've been attempting to do has actually helped to decrease stroke frequency in patients over 65. So that's working. Now, while the incidence of stroke is decreasing overall in the country, rates among young adults are increasing, right? So what we got here is the incidence of stroke in people ages 20 to 44 has risen from 17 per 100,000 in 93 to 28 per 100,000 in 2015, right? So that's a pretty decent increase, right?
Yeah, about 40%. And that's just to 2015. We know that starting in 2020, it started to increase even more.
Right. A lot of this is from, like we said, 2015, and especially with, the stress, anxiety, stuff that happened with the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Inflammation, the disease itself, right?
Yeah.
Causing all the inflammation, which is a huge precipitator of strokes, right, Bob?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's what we talk about all the time on the show, is the inflammation and how it causes all these problems. Stroke is one of them, right? Yeah. And so you had the disease itself, or I call it a disease, but the COVID itself that caused inflammation. Then, there's the medications and everything that take and try to fight that, but then you have the repair and all that comes with the medications that you take. So we're being overloaded with inflammation, especially in young people, because their diets aren't great either.
Yeah,
right?
That's a big part of it. More obesity in young adults. That's really gone up a lot. That's a big cause, which then tends to lead to diabetes and high blood pressure, which are also risks for strokes as well.
Absolutely. Well, some of the stuff that we were looking at here, there's two types of strokes. For those who don't know, right? There's an ischemic stroke in which the flow of blood and oxygen is disrupted, which causes damage to brain tissue. In older individuals, hypertension, cardiac disease, atherosclerosis, those are major causes of the ischemic strokes. And that represents about 85% of strokes in the overall stroke population and 60% of strokes in patients under 50, right? So ischemic, that's the number one. The second kind is a Oh, my camera's weird over there. Bob, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Something happened.
Something happened on my camera, guys. Bear with me. Okay.
There you go. It's back.
I got a warning that I was using too much memory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I guess that they were used to our talks from the other day, how to slow cognitive decline.
Yeah,
you don't want me to use too much memory.
Yeah. I don't remember what happened on Tuesday, but that's good. So that way it won't contribute to shutting down the camera.
No. Sorry about that, guys. Apparently, I was using too much memory on my cell phone, which is where I'm running TikTok from. By the way, let me take this time to tell you, if you guys want to join in live on the conversation, you're more than welcome. We have some people in the chat here today. We got Breezy that said good morning from YouTube. Welcome, Breezy. So sorry about that little break. But yeah, hey, how's it going? Hello. But yeah, so back to where I was. The second type of stroke is a hemorrhagic stroke, or a hemorrhage, basically, in which blood leaks out of a vessel into or around the brain, causing disruption to underlying brain tissues. Hypertension, malformations of cerebral blood vessels can be some of the causes of this type of stroke. And this hemorrhagic stroke comprises about 15% of all strokes. But this one is 40% of strokes in patients under 50. So we can see these type of strokes definitely affect younger people more, right? Kind of crazy. So when you're looking at strokes in young adults, Bob.
Yeah. So it's also important to note that we have another study that talks about mental health.
Right. That's why I brought you in here, because before I get to my part, Bob found an amazing thing that kind of shows that not only is the inflammation caused from, everyday life, toxins, getting sick, battling these things an issue, but just tell them what you found.
Yeah. So with mental health issues, they're finding that with people under the age of 40, when they have a mental health issue, which is about 1 in every 8 people under the age of 40, that they have a much higher risk for strokes. They also have a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. They also, studies show that the people who have mental health issues also tend to have other lifestyle issues that complicate it, such as they tend to have a poor diet and a lack of exercise and drug use. So we know, for example, people that use cocaine, especially if they're smoking it, they're at about a 6 times higher risk for strokes.
Wow.
And so it's people that have depression, anxiety, or insomnia, which they're categorizing for this as a mental health issues, not necessarily, but these are things that are leading to having more strokes. But they also, even for people that don't have poor lifestyle, that have mental health issues, are also experiencing more strokes.
Okay, so the common denominator here is the mental health issue, whether or not the lifestyle is good, bad, indifferent. The mental health is a key factor here. And, we talk about mental health a lot. Actually, we talk about that all the time. And one of the things I think people don't really get is that when you're stressed out, anxious, you're dealing with mental health issues, your body actually physically responds with an inflammatory response.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You've got the cortisol.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cortisol, there's 2 metabolic pathways involved, which is, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. There's a feedback loop that results in too much cortisol, which is very inflammatory. Okay. And if people are under constant background anxiety, background stress, they might have, continuously elevated cortisol. Now, cortisol is there's a lot to it because it rises and falls with your sleep cycle, sleep and wake cycle. And so there's certain times when you actually want more cortisol. So if you're getting a test for it to find out what's going on with your adrenal, they call it the adrenal stress index. You can do a saliva test like 4 separate times a day, or you can do a dried blood test, and then you can look at what a normal cortisol level rise and fall would be throughout the day, and you can look at yours compared to it. And it can be the aberrations in it can be caused by stress or lack of sleep. Stress can cause lack of sleep. But there was a study in Boston about mental health issues, whether it was long-term stress causing anxiety and depression or sudden events. So there's research that shows if there's a sudden catastrophic event in someone's life, a death in the family, an accident, that type of thing.
Yes.
They go into a very hyper sympathetic nervous system state, and it can lead to a stroke either right away or shortly after, right? But they also know that the chronic long-term stress is the same thing. So what triggers that metabolic pathway is another upstream metabolic pathway that is the connection between your heart, right? The neurons or neurites in your heart and the amygdala and the frontal cortex.
Okay.
And that gets activated when people are under constant stress. It's usually because they have this readiness to believe that things are not okay. And they say in the United States, especially since 2020, 95% of the people in the United States, people in the United States believe that 95% of the time things are not okay. So when you're of that belief, it creates this anxiety, and your amygdala actually sends a message to your frontal cortex, your conscious mind, saying, hey, things are not okay. And that signals your heart muscle. Your heart beats in response to that signal,
right,
with more or less variability. And then that beat is sending a signal to the amygdala. It's telling the amygdala, hey, things aren't okay. You get stuck in this feedback loop.
Right.
And then that loop creates ultimately the secretion of too much cortisol, which is inflammatory. So you can begin to see how stress can create inflammation, which can create a stroke. And acute stress with a sentinel negative event can create a stroke like right away.
Yeah. We actually, there's, talking to people that call in and ask about the products and stuff. When we have spoken with some people that have used products and they maybe they say, oh, well, that doesn't work, a lot of the times what ends up happening is, and we've said this a lot on the show, but because they're under so much stress, anything that they're taking isn't really helping, right? And so we've actually done a show about Beyond Massage Therapy, where we talked about different ways to release these type of things that your subconscious holds on to from these sentinel events.
Yeah. Somato-emotional release.
Right.
Yeah.
Somato-emotional release and craniosacral therapy are two of the things that we actually spoke about, and you can actually find practitioners on a website we know called upledger.com.
Yeah.
Right. If you want more about how that works, go check out our podcast, Beyond Massage Therapy, on boomerboost.com or on our YouTube channel here. I believe there's also a replay on iHeartRadio. You can find it on iTunes, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Yeah,
Spotify, anywhere like that. But just look up Live Forever Young Radio, and you'll find, I think we have about 80 shows on there. And the one you're looking for is Beyond Massage Therapy, because oftentimes no matter what you're doing, supplement wise, even if you're trying to be active in exercise, if you're dealing with something like this sentinel event, you're stuck in that loop, like Bob said, where you're constantly creating and secreting things that are going to be creating inflammation.
They call it when the past is always present. The name of Dr. Rudin's book, who's the creator of Haveny.
Right. Yep. That's very true. We talked to Hillary Russo about that very thing as well. That book, When the Past is Always Present by Dr. Rudin. And that's a really good read, especially if you have things like that you have to deal with, right? But anyway, so one of the things that I was looking at, right, when we talk about strokes in young adults, there are some causes for these strokes in the younger population that you don't see as often in the older population, 65 and older, right? So I have about 4 or 5 things here I just wanted to mention. There's cervical artery dissection. So cervical artery dissection accounts for about 10 to 25% of strokes in young adults, but only 2% of strokes in patients over 65. This is damage to the wall of large vessels in the neck. It causes disruptions of the blood flow. This can occur spontaneously or when there is intense physical stress on the neck, right? As might be seen with vigorous coughing, vomiting, or weightlifting. When you lift weights, you're lifting with your neck a lot and you're putting all this stress on the vessels that go here, right? And that's what they're talking about here. Dissections can also be seen in patients with underlying genetic diseases that cause abnormalities of these blood vessels, right? And they are often associated with neck pain, chronic neck pain, headaches, drooping eyelids, right? You okay? Yeah. Making your neck hurt, huh? Drooping eyelids before the onset of strokes, right? So that's cervical artery dissection. That's one that's more seen in young adults. Then another one is called patent foramen ovale or ovale, communication between the right and left side of the heart, and it can enable clots from the legs to pass into blood vessels that are heading up to your brain, right? And about 24 to 40% of the population have PFOs. That's what they call it, patent foramen ovale or PFOs. So the existence of a PFO does not mean the stroke was caused by it, but it remains an important cause of stroke in patients under 50. So that's another one. Underlying blood clotting abnormalities. That's one that's more seen in younger people. You had mentioned drug use. Drug use, individuals using cocaine within 24 hours of using had a 6-fold increase in the risk of stroke, with the risk highest when smoking was the method of use. Bob, you were right on the money with that one. That is not a very good thing. Hey, how's it going? We have Larry and Christina. Hi, everybody. Thanks for stopping in, talking about strokes in younger people, what's causing them. And then the last one I have on my list that's more prevalent in younger people, which is kind of odd. It says it's just genetic disease, such as Fabry disease or Moyamoya disease. That's more prevalent in younger people, apparently.
Yeah. And I think that this information is very good for people to listen to, because most of the time young people or even their family members don't associate stroke with young people. They think it's for older people. So if someone's showing symptoms of having a stroke, they don't recognize it. And we know that people who are younger get to the hospital much later.
Yes.
And that's a problem, because there are things that can be done with clot busting, medication, and even surgery that can break free a clot. And it's more so than pretty much anything else, other than acute bleeding of your arm has been severed and you're going to bleed to death.
Right.
A stroke can be helped with early intervention,
right,
dramatically, and the recovery is much faster, and the lingering symptoms afterwards are much less severe, the sooner you get to the hospital. So it's important to know what the symptoms are of a stroke and know that much younger people than you might think can have strokes.
Yeah, the awareness is actually what we're talking about. And that's the key, because like you said, unfortunately, we think of a stroke, ischemic TIAs, as something that not only, but is kind of more exclusive to an older person, right? Because they've had more time to let the arteries, get clogged or clots or whatever. But when you really look at what you're saying about them, younger people getting to the doctors for this later, that's because they're not even aware that it could be a problem. They just, I'm feeling a little dizzy, weird, I got a headache. That's odd. Let me go lay down. When really, it could be something much more problematic in the future.
Especially some of the common symptoms with a person's face drooping, their speech all of a sudden becomes slurred.
You know who that just happened to? A very famous singer, the Biebs, Justin Bieber. He had that video where half his face wouldn't move. And I mean, that kid's, what is he, 20 something? Maybe 30. No, I don't even know. I don't know, but I know he's not old. And
Halle Berry was another one that, and she talked about what had happened to her arteries, but also a sudden and severe headache, very important. And then also the balance and getting dizzy or other ones.
Another thing that happened that there's not a lot of information out about, a lot of people are speculating about, but very famous Jamie Foxx. He was in the hospital. They haven't released a lot about, but there was a point where he wasn't able to speak. He went into where he was working on his show, and all of a sudden just couldn't interact. Right. So it's not just, older adults. You've got people who, I mean, we don't know their lifestyles, and lifestyle plays a big part in a lot of this, but we don't, these are people that we assume would probably be living pretty well, who knows what they do behind closed doors, but it's not exclusive,
So like in regard to the mental health issues, if those are leading to poor lifestyle habits that lead to diabetes and high blood pressure, the obvious ones are your diet, which is the first being eating too much sugar, causes tremendous inflammation, right? High glycemic index carbs, eating overcooked meat that creates glycotoxins. Those are parts of your diet. Processed foods that have a lot of omega-6 fats and trans fats.
Yeah, the bad fats are not good. Obviously, that's why they call them bad fats, but they're in so much more than you realize, and that's, we talk about hidden sugars. Let's talk about hidden bad fats. Anything you see trans fat, you really kind of want to stay away from.
And obviously smoking and drug use are big risk factors, and then obesity in general. People can become obese even if they're not consuming too much sugar, and a lot of that relates to a lack of exercise, which leads to poor cardiovascular health. So those are some of the things people have to watch out for. But then on the mental health side, which is what we were originally talking about, and we talked about the precipitating pathway with the amygdala and the heart muscle, right?
Right.
That's where you want to know about finding your inner balance.
Yes. We actually did a show on that. It's actually called Finding Your Inner Balance. It's what we were showing on the show is an actual amazing app that's paired with a Bluetooth device that actually clips on your ear and gives you a heart rate variability monitor. And what that allows you to do is try to help your heart and your amygdala make that connection, right? And it's try to get out of that state of everything's not okay. Right. And one of the methods, it's not just clipping this on here and doing that, but they use a rhythmic breathing, right? So in the app, you can set the rhythmic breathing and you can watch it pulse, try to mimic that. But one of the things that we talk about a lot too that you want to do is focus on gratitude.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's the opposite of things are not okay.
Exactly.
So when you sync your breath, it's pretty easy technique. You clip the device on your ear. Then there's another clip for the transponder can go on your shirt.
Mm-hmm.
You turn on the app called Inner Balance. A little circle shows up. It's like a mandala.
Mm-hmm.
And when you, and it shrinks and it expands based on the setting you give it for how many seconds you want it to get smaller for, how many seconds to get bigger. And this is what you sync your breath to because you're looking at the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And you're breathing in until it stops expanding, and then you breathe out while it shrinks. And once you're able to do that and just casually follow along, then you begin thinking about what you're grateful for. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is there's these little boxes around the outside of the circle, and they begin to fill in with a color.
Mm-hmm.
Green means you're doing well. Blue means you need some help. Red means you're still really stressed. But as you focus on gratitude and your breath, more and more you begin to fill up with the green.
Exactly.
And you're trying to get the green to go all the way around and maintain it for a period of time. And for some people, they take to it right away. Other people, it takes a lot of practice, but it always works.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the little hiccups that can occur for people is they'll lose their concentration on focusing on gratitude.
Yep.
Right. So what we encourage people to do is use what's called a gratitude stack.
Yes.
Okay. So Raleigh, you are a person who would say, okay, I have a wife and a daughter.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm really grateful for my wife. Well, this right away starts to change the way your heart is beating.
Mm-hmm.
And well, what are you grateful about? I'm grateful that she's such a kind person. She's always attuned with other people's feelings. It's like, okay, that's good. What else? I'm really grateful how she treats my daughter.
Yep.
Because she's always encouraging her, helping her, making sure everything is good for her. And so in this way, you keep on going and going and going.
Yeah, and what we're doing is we're not just picking one thing as well. I'm grateful to be alive. No, I'm grateful. Well, yes, that's great. Be grateful to be alive, but I'm grateful to be alive and be able to stand out and view this beautiful greenery. And so pick something even more specific than being alive.
And use the word because.
Right. Exactly.
Grateful to be alive
because. Right. And then put in there because I'm able to watch my daughter grow and help her or whatever the thing is that makes you feel grateful. And so that allows your mind and your amygdala and your heart to get into sync. And then once you can do that, it kind of teaches you how to stay in that gratitude state.
Yep.
And that's the key.
Yep. That's the key. The longer you linger in gratitude, the more you draw your new life to you. Mm-hmm. And so your new life is, I am no longer going to be a person who thinks things aren't okay 95% of the time. I'm going to be a person who practices gratitude so much that eventually I'm walking around in gratitude almost all the time. Mm-hmm. And only if something really, really severe happens does it knock me off course.
Right.
Okay? Right. You can also combine this, Raleigh, with havening.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because when havening, the book, When the Past is Always Present, what they're referring to is things that happened in the past that you perceive to be bad or awful. Mm-hmm. And so things remind you of those situations constantly.
Right.
Something you see, something you hear, something you smell, right? Something you sense. You haven't even seen it. Just a memory pops up randomly. Now it triggers the emotion that you had when the event originally happened.
Yep.
And you have this chemistry happens in your amygdala that creates this stress. Right. Mm-hmm. So havening actually blocks that chemistry from happening. Mm-hmm. So it goes very, very well with the inner balance technology.
Mm-hmm.
Havening is very simple. You can rub your hands together. It's about all you have to do. Some people will rub their arms,
do your face and
rub
stuff.
their face. It feels really good. And then you're going to use languaging to reframe the event that happened in the past, so it's no longer always present.
Right.
Right. And so you can rub your hands together. You can say something like, even though up until now I thought that I had to continue to have these stressful episodes, when I think about this thing that happened in the past, I completely love and accept myself anyway. And I'm so grateful now that I realize it's in the past. It doesn't have to have an effect on me in this moment, and I can be at complete peace.
There you go.
So by doing this and saying this, you just literally change the brain wave in your amygdala. So inside your brain, you have neurochemistry that's happening, and you have brain waves, and the chemistry is dependent on a particular type of wave. In this case, when you're in beta waves in your amygdala, the chemistry will happen that triggers a flashback, so to speak, right? But in delta, none of that happens. So it trains your amygdala to go into delta whenever something might have reminded you of a negative thing in the past. It blocks the neurochemistry, and you don't have this visceral response, this somato response that is so devastating for people, including contributing to strokes.
Right. And that's the key here. That's the thing, is when you can eliminate a risk factor, right? Yep. And one of them is the mental health aspect. We could see it contributes to the risk of having a stroke. When you can use a simple technique that is not only something that you can learn, but something you can carry with you into everyday conversations, relationships, communications, then not only are you going to further your relationships, but you're going to be able to live longer and healthier. And so that's kind of like what we're talking about here, right? Lowering the incidence of and risks of these strokes, especially in younger people. As things start to develop, and as people and things start to change in society, people have to adapt.
Yeah.
So this is a tool we can use to mitigate that stuff.
Yes, and I think most people would agree, not everybody, but most people would agree that life is more stressful now than it was, 10 years ago. A lot of things have happened in the society, including a pandemic, et cetera, and people are under more stress. So for these times, until paradise reigns on earth for everyone,
right?
What we can do is learn the techniques, these advanced techniques created by really, really brilliant researchers like Dr. Rudin and like the people at the HeartMath Institute that created Inner Balance. This is research that's been going on for 30 years, where they now have technology where we can much more easily manage our stress. It used to be, well, what are you going to do? We're going for a walk. We're going to meditate. Well, now you have havening, you have the emotional freedom technique, you have nonviolent communication, and you have inner balance. So there's a lot more tools that work a lot better.
Yeah.
And so these tools become ultimately necessary for especially young people, that now that we know more strokes are happening and a lot of it's related to mental health and stress. You have to go and learn these things. This is no longer optional, nice woo-woo types of stuff. These are critical skills for the modern day in order not to get sick and die young.
And nobody wants that. But yeah, so here we go. We found another great topic, a way to kind of see what we could do to mitigate it on our own, right? If there is a mental health issue that you're having, please make sure you reach out to a professional, right? Always
Yep.
don't be afraid to, don't be afraid to admit when you got to talk to someone, because a lot of the times, like we were talking about, it's not going to help you. The younger people with the strokes, they get to the hospital too late, right?
Yep.
Don't let that happen. Don't be one of those. If you recognize something's going on with your mental health, if you recognize something's going on physically and you don't feel good for a consistent amount of time, that's when you want to act, right? The awareness of this problem is what we're talking about. So hopefully that's what we've been able to do today. It's getting close to when you wanted to end that there, Bob. So
very good, Molly.
I don't think we have too much more to go over, but what I wanted to say, as I always do before we leave, is meet us up here every Tuesday and Thursday, 11 a.m. EST. It'll be me and Bob, or me, or whatever. We'll be here. We'll be doing topics. If anybody out there has a topic they want us to kind of talk about, or questions, please feel free to join in on the chat on YouTube and Facebook here. We also have TikTok. I can't reach TikTok as well, so if I can't get to you guys over there, join us on YouTube or Facebook. I have the chat right here. I can interact with you. But yeah, don't hesitate. Tuesday, Thursday, 11 a.m., YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Boomers Wellness Network, Boomers Forever Young. That's it, man.
Come on and subscribe and follow us along. Ask any questions that you have. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching us on Live Forever Young Radio live. See you next Tuesday.
Have fun, y'all.